Hello, I'm Jan Newharth, Chair and Chief Executive Officer of the Freedom Forum. Welcome to First Five Now, a Freedom Forum conversation series exploring the complex questions our First Amendment freedoms face today and featuring current newsmakers who put their freedoms into practice. Today, best-selling author Brad Meltzer talks about how a school district in Pennsylvania banned a list of books from his classrooms, including two of his children's books about Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks. Brad will discuss the reasons the schools banned the books, why Meltzer and many in the community spoke, assembled, and petitioned to end the ban, and how exercising their First Amendment freedoms led to change. This program is brought to you by the Freedom Forum, which fosters First Amendment freedoms for all. Our vision is an America where everyone knows, understands, values, and defends the freedoms of religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition. And now, please welcome our moderator, John Maynard.
Thank you, Jan. Hello and welcome to First Five Now. I'm John Maynard, Senior Director of Programs at the Freedom Forum. Author Brad Meltzer is a New York Times best-selling author who's written a slew of thrillers that have been read by millions. But Brad himself found himself in the middle of his own mini-thriller this past year when he learned that two of his books, and these were children's books, had been banned from a Pennsylvania school district. The books in question were I Am Martin Luther King Jr. and I Am Rosa Parks. Both books are part of Brad's Ordinary People Change the World series, which profiles historic figures including Abraham Lincoln, Helen Keller, and Neil Armstrong for kids. Brad's two books were two of more than 200 anti-racism books and resources first suggested by the Central York School District's Diversity Education Committee last year. However, the Central York School Board vetoed the entire list, with members referring to the list of reading and educational materials as divisive and bad ideas. Well, today we're going to talk to Brad about the ban and how he and a community of students and parents used their First Amendment rights to overturn it. Brad is the #1 New York Times best-selling author of The Inner Circle, The Book of Fate, and 10 other best-selling thrillers. He also writes nonfiction books like The First Conspiracy, about a secret plot to kill George Washington, and the aforementioned Ordinary People Change the World kids book series. His newest thriller, The Escape Artist, debuted at #1 on the bestseller list. His newest kids book is I Am Oprah Winfrey, and his newest nonfiction book is The Lincoln Conspiracy, the secret plot to kill America's 16th president and why it failed. Brad is also responsible for helping find the missing 9/11 flag that the firefighters raised at Ground Zero. After it went missing after 9/11, Brad used his TV show, Brad Meltzer's Lost History, as a call to action, and the flag was returned. Brad, welcome to First Five Now.
Thanks for having me, John.
First, let's talk about the two books that were banned, I Am Rosa Parks and I Am Martin Luther King Jr. Tell us what the goals of these books and the whole entire series is.
Yeah, so I started these books because I was tired of my own kids looking at people who were famous for being famous or reality TV stars. And I just thought I can give them so many better heroes than that. I can give them heroes of kindness and compassion and character. That thing that almost seems lost in today's world is character. And we started with I Am Amelia Earhart. We did I Am Abraham Lincoln. We did I Am Rosa Parks and Albert Einstein. For my son who loves sports, we did I Am Jackie Robinson. And we've really run the gamut. Lucille Ball, Helen Keller, as you said. But the amazing thing happened in 2016 as the presidential election was approaching. Two of our books, as Hillary and Donald Trump were arguing every day on television, beating each other up, two of our books started selling more than any others. And they were I Am Martin Luther King Jr. and I Am George Washington. And it wasn't a Democrat or Republican thing. It was that parents and grandparents on both sides were tired of turning on the TV and seeing politicians when what they wanted to show their kids were leaders. And we all know there's a huge difference between a politician and a leader. So we have since then done Jim Henson and Walt Disney, and we did Harriet Tubman and Jane Goodall. You name it, we've run through it. But the goal of the series is it's not a set of history books, it's a set of values. And trying to give kids these better heroes to look up to, kids that look just like them and people that are just like them. So that's where the series started. Chris Eliopoulos is our amazing artist, amazing cartoonist from New Jersey. And he obviously has this art style. It probably is worth bearing just so you can see what Chris does. Um, it's almost like a cross between Calvin and Hobbes meets Charlie Brown, but he makes these characters really lovable, and that's why kids take to them. So that's where the series set out. That's where we started from, and then lo and behold, things took a twist.
Yes, and let's get to that twist. Tell us when you first heard about this ban, and tell us what your immediate reaction was.
Yeah, so I think I heard about it. I forget it was on my Twitter or Instagram page. Someone wrote to me and said the book on Rosa Parks is banned, and I thought that can't be true. I mean, you saw the books, right? They are literally lovable. There's no politics to them. They're for little kids, telling them the stories of Rosa Parks. And it was true, as you said, in the Central York School District, they had banned. And what really happened, just to be clear, and so we can make sure everyone understands, nothing on that list was actually really checked out at that point. What we finally heard is a list had been made. A group of diversity committee had put together a list of here's these 200 something books that you can use to talk about diversity issues, talk about race issues. And what the school board said was, well, we want to vet these books first, which to me is actually not a bad thing, right? Before you give books to kids, you want to see what you're giving them. But the fast one that the school board was pulling was this, is that was a year ago. What they did is they froze the list and said we need time to vet the books. But after a year, our books are 30 pages long. They're kids' books. You could read all 200 books in about a couple weeks, and they let a year go by. And what they were really doing was just using their power to turn this quote unquote freeze into what became a ban. And became a ban because librarians didn't know what to do, teachers didn't know what to do. There was that confusion of saying, am I going to be in trouble if I use this book? Am I not? No one looked at the actual content of any of our books and said, I don't like this or I don't like that. They just didn't like the idea of talking about these subjects. And so they sat on it for a year. And I will tell you, my reaction when I first heard about it is I was heartbroken. My wife was pissed. My wife's also an attorney. She was really, really angry, but I was heartbroken because I just thought my initial reaction was so many kids are not going to hear the story of Rosa Parks. It had nothing to do with me. But no, all these kids are going to lose the story of Dr. King and Rosa Parks, and that just seems silly.
And these books were not going to be made part of the curriculum, correct? They were just going to be available at school libraries and available for them to read. Give us, tell us what you know about that.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, basically, they just made a list and said, hey, if you want to use these books, here are some good ones you can use. Teachers, you can pick from what you want. And it wasn't, to be clear, it was hardly a controversial list, right? The books on the list were Malala's autobiography, the Sonia Sotomayor's book was on there. There was a book about From Sesame Street, how to talk to your kids about racism. When you're against Ernie and Bert, you're on the wrong side of history, right? I mean, if you're banning books, you're on the wrong side of history, but it's Sesame Street. This is hardly controversial stuff, but they just kind of came out and just said no to everything. Again, not that it was being force-fed, not that it was being pushed down anyone's throats, but they just didn't, and you see where we are. You and I are talking today, and it's right after that first kind of election that's happened. And, I said when it happened back then is we're just going to see more of this over and over and over, because what happens is to a certain part of the population, words like critical race theory suddenly become really scary, right? And we saw exactly that. You saw people using terms like, I don't want them indoctrinating our children. When you hear that word, indoctrination, that's your buzzword, right? That's a fear word. It's that word that you use whether you want to marginalize the Black community, the Jewish community. They did it with the gay community. You look at any group that is the other, the immigrant community, the Muslim community, you'll always see that word. They're going to come and indoctrinate you. And all that is fear mongering. It's just fear mongering. And so the very first thing we did is we teamed up with, we took the lessons of Rosa Parks and Dr. King, and we protested. I immediately started tracking down amazing, amazing activists in the York community. I found these two incredible women who ran the Little Free Library there. And they said, we have lists of books that we want people to buy them so we can put them in the Little Free Library so people can still have them even if the school library doesn't have them. And I said, okay, pump your list up. We're going to buy books for every kid in your entire community. I looked up, I think there were something like 5,200 kids that were in the elementary schools in that school district. And I said, I'm going to find books for all of them. And so I went on my Twitter, I went on my Facebook, I went on my Instagram and said, everyone, don't just buy our book, buy every single book on the list. And suddenly the books started pouring in. And that was obviously the first step we took.
Right. Yeah, we'll continue. What else? Because what I love about this story is that the whole ordeal showed you how the First Amendment in action can really affect change. I mean, you have everything here. You have petition, you have assembly, you have speech. Tell us more about what steps you took to overturn this ban, which ultimately did happen.
Yeah, and what immediately happened was we started getting phone calls from the press. And Fox News called me and asked me to come on, said this is absurd. CNN called me and said, can you come on? This is absurd. When Fox and CNN agree, you screwed up, right? It's so rare these days especially, but both of them realized. And so the first thing we did is we publicly shamed them. We literally went, and I went on the airwaves and went to every media outlet that would, called me and said, yeah, we're going to tell the story. We just told the story and put it out there. The great part was now it got press, and now people were really looking at it. It suddenly was snowballing. And I got word that there was going to be this huge school board meeting that they were going to have where they were going to discuss the issue. And they said there's going to be an open forum for an hour. And Brad, would you come? Someone asked me, said, will you come and please speak to the school board on behalf of the community? So I thought to myself, how could I possibly miss this? So Chris Eliopoulos, our artist, myself, got on the school board meeting. I was the first person called on. I literally read, I opened up, because I didn't want to make a big speech. I said, I'm going to read to you from Rosa Parks. I'm going to read to you what I read to them. And I read to them one of my favorite lines from there. And it says, I am Rosa Parks. I'm not a politician or a president or an actor or a famous business owner. I'm just an ordinary person. But I'm also proof there's no such thing as an ordinary person. I hope you'll always stand up for yourself, and I hope you'll remember that we're all in this together. And it says, on the back, I am Rosa Parks. I will always stand up for what's right. And just read through a couple other pages of that, a couple pages of I Am Martin Luther King Jr., and I thought, truly, I must have saved the day with this reading, right? First Amendment in action. And then, John, all the other people in the audience started speaking. Angry mothers who were saying, how can you do this in my kid's school? A member of the military said, I used to go to this school. I'm embarrassed of this school board and what they did banning books like this. And then the best part was the students started speaking. 16 and 17-year-old kids started saying, how dare you take away these books that look like me? Every book you picked is either about someone of color or it's written by someone of color. They did not miss that code in there, right? How dare you do this? How dare you deprive us books that show people like me? And one after the other, these impassioned students just took them to task. By the time the school board meeting was over, it was so clear I didn't need to be there at all. The students in this community were the real incredible heroes, and they brought the power back. And it was funny because right after that, they asked to meet with me. The students said, can we meet with you? The teachers reached out to me. And where does it start? It's not just the students, but they have incredible teachers too, and teachers who encouraged them and said, you know what? You see a wrong happening. You see injustice happening. You need to fight for what's right. And I met with these students on Zoom, met with their teachers on Zoom, and talked to them about their power and made them realize, listen, what you saw in this week and a half that this took place was not just some bad that happened, but some good that happened too. And they used their First Amendment rights to, as you said, mobilize, get together, talk about it, read, put it out there, put it in the press. And it was pretty amazing and humbling to watch. And by the end of the meeting, the school board voted unanimously to undo the freeze, to undo the ban, and all the books were released from the list. And so, everyone was like, oh, the press media was like, democracy gets saved for that day. But to me, there was nothing to celebrate, because I knew even back then, I said to my wife, this is just the start, because it worked. It actually worked for a year, and it riled everyone up. And half the school board, only half of them I think were truly embarrassed. Half that school board was embarrassed and said, I'm sorry, I didn't realize it was going to go on for that long. But the other half knew exactly what they were doing. I heard them use those words. I don't want people indoctrinating my kids. I don't want to be teaching this. Race is a tricky issue. I know it's a tricky issue. But if you don't talk to your kids about race, you're doing them a disservice. And as I said, those, as we're seeing right now, critical race theory is the greatest boogeyman that a certain part of the community is using to fearmonger and drive us apart. Because if you ask people and you say, hey, listen, you want to have critical race theory and then people indoctrinating your kids? Everyone says no. But if you say, do you think that we should talk about the history of racism in the country, and maybe if we talk about it correctly and with great care, that our kids can understand each other, maybe we can come together as a people? Most people say yes. It's just how you frame it. And they know that if you frame it in a certain way, you can get and fearmonger all you want. And that's why we're going to see it, especially as the next presidential election comes, as the midterms hit, we're going to see it over and over and over again. This is just the start.
Right. Well, it's a fascinating story, and it shows you the freedom of speech and assembly in action, as well as freedom of press. So it's why it's such a perfect time to talk to you here at the Freedom Forum, where we do foster First Amendment freedoms for all. Brad, let me leave you on just a couple of questions while we have you. It's great to have a best-selling author with us on our program. Tell us how you come up with all your ideas. You've written all these great bestsellers. I'm sure it's a question you get millions of times, but while we have you, tell us how that all happens.
It comes from just keeping your eyes open. Good ideas are everywhere. They really are. And I remember I wrote my first book in law school, and someone was talking about Supreme Court clerks, and I was like, wait, there are 27, 28-year-old kids that have access to the Supreme Court decisions before they are announced to the public? That's cool. I literally wrote the word Supreme Court clerk, and I wrote book idea, and I circled it on the top, and as I said, wrote book idea on the top. And that's where the first idea came from. And it's every day, it's just a matter of kind of looking around and seeing what I find interesting. In the new book that I'm working on, the new thrill is called The Lightning Rod. It comes out in March. I won't ruin the book, but I found this super secret government site that I never knew about. And I saw that, I read about it in the paper. It wasn't like it was so top secret, but I read about it and I was like, no one knows about this. I got to get inside. And was able to do the research and find out more about it. And I was like, this is what the Lightning Rod is going to be about. It's going to take place in this universe. And I always love kind of digging in. And it's the same, it's no difference with Rosa Parks or Dr. King or any of the kids' books. It's just finding a good story. A good story is a good story. And sometimes you find those stories in the footnotes. I found the secret plot to kill George Washington, the real one that happened. I found it in the footnote. No one reads the footnotes, but us lawyers do. And I saw it and I was like, is that real? Is that fake? Is that a nonsense on the internet? But it was real. There was a secret plot to kill George Washington in 1776. When George Washington found out about it, he gathered up those responsible, built a gallows, and he hanged the person responsible in front of 20,000 people, the largest public execution at that point in North American history. And I said, I want to know more about that story. What happened? Who was trying to kill George Washington? So each time it's just me relying on one thing, John. I know one thing is true. I'm not that special. And if I find that subject interesting, hopefully there are a lot of other people who will find it interesting too.
One final question, Brad, and that is, how does the First Amendment guide your work in your writing of fiction, nonfiction, children's books, and all the other things you do?
Listen, I write about government secrets. Why can I write about them? I couldn't write them in every country, right? It wouldn't protect me in those other countries. When I write our nonfiction books, whether it's Dr. King or Rosa Parks or Amelia Earhart or Abraham Lincoln, no one can tell me, oh, you can't write about that. I have the rights to do that. You can't tell history. Why? The First Amendment protects me as a book. It protects me and lets me tell that story so no one can own history. And as a result, we can get different views and different viewpoints, and not just that biased view, again, that you see in other countries where you're getting, the story that I saw, I'm sure you saw it as well, that new law that I think it was in China that said you can't criticize any heroes of the government. You can't criticize any heroes throughout history. If you look at it, an historical figure that they like, you can't say a bad word about them. Obviously, I'm protected every single day in the writings that I do, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, to be able to say exactly what I find, what I research, and what I believe. And it's the only reason I get to sit here today.
Well, best-selling author and historian Brad Meltzer, thank you so much for appearing on First Five Now and sharing this incredible story.
Thank you, John.
And to all our viewers out there, please send us your thoughts on today's program via social media at the addresses listed below. We'll be posting a recording of this event on our YouTube page, and you can post comments there also. And we hope you'll join us for our next episode of First Five Now on Thursday, November 18th at 2 p.m., when we'll talk with Chris Melody Fields Figueroa, Executive Director of the Ballot Initiative Strategy Center, who talks about the power of petition as it relates to ballot initiatives, a grassroots tradition of American democracy. Thank you for joining us for First Five Now.